Hello and welcome to the Dailies. Today we'll take a look at how the global press is framing the rapidly expanding war with Iran. From Washington to Brussels, Tel Aviv to London, media outlets are debating whether this is a strategic masterstroke or a dangerous gamble with global consequences. American coverage questions President Trump's political risks. European newspapers focus on legality and instability. Israeli media emphasizes security and operational success, while Arab commentators warn of regional transformation. Here's how the world's press is reading this war. American media today framed the war on Iran as a rapidly escalating and high-risk conflict, with heavy focus on civilian casualties and confusion over the administration's stated war aims. Coverage highlighted internal contradictions in Washington's justification for the strikes and growing political pushback from Democrats. Many outlets also emphasized fears of regional spillover and the possibility of deeper U.S. involvement, including potential ground operations. The New York Times portrays President Trump's Iran offensive as the most consequential gamble of his presidency. As we can see, the analysis contends that as U.S. casualties rise and oil markets react nervously, the conflict threatens both regional stability and Trump's political standing. The piece highlights the tension between Trump's America First anti-war promises and his expanding military actions, noting fractures within his base and broad public disapproval. The piece frames the war as a high-risk test for Trump's leadership, with uncertain military and electoral consequences. Politico argues that Iran presents a far more complex challenge for President Trump than Venezuela did. The piece notes that, unlike the swift decapitation of Nicolas Maduro's regime, Iran's entrenched theocratic system lacks a clear successor Washington can work with, and its power structures remain largely intact. The analysis highlights uncertainty within the administration, public skepticism at home, and also doubts abroad, raising questions about whether U.S. objectives are shifting from regime change to more limited military goals. Ali Riza Nader and Nick Kosar wrote in Foreign Policy, arguing that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's death does not guarantee the collapse of Iran's regime. The authors explain that while a provisional leadership council seeks to preserve continuity, the opposition remains fragmented and lacks a unified, organized alternative. They warn that without a credible day-after plan, regime collapse could indeed trigger civil war, instability, and nuclear risks. The article contends that U.S. strategy must move beyond decapitation strikes towards inclusive political planning to avoid deeper regional chaos. Robert Statloff traces a century of U.S. presidents invoking freedom to justify intervention in the Middle East, arguing that such promises have repeatedly ended in disappointment or disaster. His article in the Washington Post contends that from Franklin Roosevelt to both Bush presidents, regime change rhetoric often outpaced strategy and results. Statloff also frames President Trump's call for Iranian regime change as part of this troubled legacy, questioning whether it will repeat past failures or chart a more limited, sustainable path with fewer long-term consequences. The Wall Street Journal examines how the widening Iran conflict has triggered unprecedented disruptions in Middle Eastern airspace, surpassing previous regional flare-ups. The piece explains that with over 11,000 flight cancellations and 1.5 million passengers affected, airlines face soaring fuel costs, rerouting challenges, and mounting safety risks. The report highlights the the strategic importance of Gulf aviation hubs and warns that prolonged instability could reshape global travel patterns, airline profitability, and also energy-linked operating costs in the months ahead. The Economist analyzes China's response to Iran's crisis, saying it reflects pragmatic self-interest rather than ideological loyalty. The piece notes that while publicly critical of US and Israeli strikes, Beijing views Iran as strategically useful but ultimately expendable. With diversified energy sources and stronger ties to Gulf states, now China is less dependent on Tehran than assumed. The analysis suggests Beijing may even benefit if US attention is diverted or sanctions ease, revealing China as an economic heavyweight but political bystander in Middle Eastern conflict. Arab media coverage generally framed the war as a dangerous escalation, with strong emphasis on violations of sovereignty and civilian casualties. Many outlets focus on the risk of regional spillover, energy disruptions, and the potential for sectarian instability across the Middle East. At the same time, there are calls for de-escalation and diplomatic solutions, alongside concern about how the conflict could reshape regional power balances. Iyad Abu Shakra argues in Sharq al-Awsat that the war on Iran signals a profound regional transformation long in the making. He contends that Netanyahu, emboldened by shifts in Washington and regional fragmentation, seized a strategic moment to confront Tehran. The article actually portrays Iran as having miscalculated US-Israeli resolve and overextended its regional ambitions. Abu Shakra warns that beyond regime change, the conflict could trigger a sweeping geopolitical reordering, potentially reshaping identities, alliances, and historical narratives across the Middle East. Israeli media largely portrayed the war as a necessary defensive move to eliminate Iran's missile and nuclear threat, highlighting operational successes and intelligence achievements. Coverage stresses national resilience and preparedness for retaliation. Some outlets, however, raise cautious questions about escalation and long-term consequences. The Times of Israel focuses on Marco Rubio's revelation that the US launched strikes on Iran because it anticipated retaliation following a planned Israeli attack. The piece recounts how Rubio acknowledged Washington knew Israel intended to strike and believed Iran would immediately target American assets in response. The report highlights how this admission complicates earlier claims of an imminent threat from Iran itself. It centers on the implication that US military action was driven by Israel's move and the expectation of blowback. Yediot Aharonot details the IDF's expansion of ground operations in southern Lebanon to counter renewed Hezbollah attacks amid the wider Iran war. The report notes Israeli forces are holding positions south of the Litani River while conducting extensive strikes on Hezbollah infrastructure to prevent infiltration and rocket fire on northern communities. The piece frames the move as defensive, emphasizing the government authorization and also deterrence, while highlighting the risk of a widening multi-front conflict involving Lebanon, Iran, and regional actors. The Jerusalem Post, citing the Financial Times, details how Israel allegedly hacked Tehran's traffic cameras and used artificial intelligence to map Ali Khamenei's movements before assassinating him. According to the report, Israeli intelligence reportedly identified the optimal moment to strike by analyzing surveillance data to establish behavioral patterns and therefore firing 30 missiles at his compound. It actually highlights the role of cyber espionage, AI-driven analysis, and also CIA human intelligence in enabling the precision attack, underscoring the technological sophistication behind the operation. British media coverage has been cautious and conflicted, balancing reporting on the immediate military developments with intense debate over the UK's role. Broadly, outlets have emphasized the legality and morality of the strikes, the risks of escalation, and the government's decision to allow US forces limited access to British bases. The Times actually criticizes Britain's limited role in the US-Israel war against Iran, arguing that the government is retreating into cautious inaction. The editorial contends that safeguarding maritime trade, supporting Israel and also maintaining alliance credibility demand a stronger British contribution. The piece warns that Iranian threats to vital energy routes require more than defensive posturing, framing military restraint as both political hesitation and capability decline. The editorial urges Britain to step up alongside America rather than remain a bystander. The Independent, on the other hand, defends Sir Keir Starmer's cautious approach to the US-Israel war with Iran, arguing his initial refusal to allow British bases to be used was grounded in international law and sound judgment. It actually contends that his later limited approval was justified by Iranian retaliation and the need for self-defense. Now, framing his maneuvering as pragmatic rather than indecisive, the piece praises Starmer for balancing legality, alliance obligations and national interest during a volatile international crisis. The Guardian explains how the US-Israeli assault on Iran has rapidly spiraled into a regional war. The piece actually includes detailed strike maps, as you can see, tracing attacks across at least 14 Iranian cities and showing how retaliation extended into Israel, the Gulf, and also Cyprus. The piece also included a before and after satellite imagery. It's a comparison that underscores the scale of the decapitation strike on the Supreme Leader's compound. As you can see, this is the after a picture of the compound. The piece also includes photographs of burning streets in Tehran, missile devastation near Beit Shemesh, and also drone damage in Bahrain, bringing the human toll into focus. Another image also was of the oil tanker that transiting in Hormuz that has been hit, as you can see, highlighting the mounting danger to global energy supplies. And we'll end with European media, which struck a more cautious and critical tone, focusing heavily on international law, the risk of regional destabilization, and the absence of UN authorization. Coverage emphasized fears of wider Middle East escalation, energy shocks, and refugee flows affecting Europe. Many outlets also highlighted divisions between Washington and European capitals, portraying the conflict as a dangerous gamble with uncertain endgame. Deutsche Welle examines deep divisions within the European Union over the legality of US-Israeli strikes on Iran. The report explains that while Germany urges restraint and avoids criticizing Washington, Spain condemns the attacks as unlawful and destabilizing. It also cites legal experts who are similarly split on whether the strikes can be justified under international law. The piece highlights Europe's dilemma, balancing alliance politics with commitment to a rules-based order amid warnings that silence on legality could weaken Europe's credibility globally. And finally, Le Monde traces the calculated US-Israeli shadow campaign that culminated in the assassination of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. The piece details how intelligence sharing, covert operations, and years of maximum pressure under Donald Trump set the stage for the unprecedented strikes. It actually situates the killing within a longer arc of sabotage, assassinations, and nuclear brinkmanship, highlighting Israel's strategic persistence and Trump's disruptive approach. The piece presents the operation as both a tactical success and a gamble with unpredictable regional consequences. That's it from us today. Thanks for watching the Dailies, only on Al Arabiya English.